Something I hear from you guys a lot is that you just don't trust yourself around food. Maybe you feel like once you start eating, you cannot stop, or there are certain foods that you just can't have in the house. Perhaps when you've tried intuitive eating, it just ends up descending into even more chaos. So if you're a human being who has to eat food, but you don't trust yourself around food, what are you supposed to do? Because most of the advice out there about our eating assumes that you already trust yourself to follow through on what you've decided to eat. And also this advice assumes that if you are not able to follow through on what you've decided to eat, then the problem's with you. That's a you problem. You don't have enough willpower. But in this video, I want to talk about how we lose trust in ourselves, but more importantly, how we build it back. This is not an overnight process. If you think about a relationship between two people and the trust has broken down, one of the first decisions that even needs to be made is whether you want to try to build that trust back up, and then putting in what it actually takes to build that trust back up. So let's begin with why you don't trust yourself. Because you're not alone, and there are several reasons for this. If you're someone who's had repeated periods of binging, that destroys self-trust. When you binge, it feels like you lose agency over your choices. You're on autopilot. It doesn't feel like you even have the choice to stop. If you have years of yo-yo dieting under your belt, that is also going to contribute to this lack of self-trust. There's a lot of talk in recent years about potential benefits of fasting. And maybe you've done that and thought, gosh, when I can fast, this is so much better. But when I start eating, that's when I feel out of control. And let me put it this way. How many times have you promised to yourself that from this moment onwards, you're going to do it differently around food? I'm going to hazard a guess that that's probably too many to count. And so if you've had these behaviors that are going on for years, it is going to take effort to build that trust back. I know you want the quick fix. I know you want the bit of advice that's just going to click all of this stuff into place. And there's a bit of a cruel paradox with this stuff, that quite often self-distrust itself keeps feeding the problem, because the behaviors that you then try to do in order to manage the fact that you're someone who just can't be trusted around food tend to be along the lines of control, restriction, and avoidance. If I can just control, restrict, and avoid certain tricky situations, then I'm grand, then I can remain in control. The problem with these are that they lead to a build-up of pressure, a build-up of hunger, and a build-up of psychological deprivation, and then maybe an emotional build-up of pressure as well. And so when overeating finally happens, it's to release that pressure. And you may not feel great about it, but it's performing a function for you. And the problem with this cycle is the more you go round and round it feels like eating just becomes more chaotic, more out of control, which just gives you more and more evidence for the fact that you're someone who can't be trusted. If this is you, you are stuck in this cycle of distrust. So you have the distrust, and because you don't trust yourself, that leads to control, which then leads to pressure, which then leads to overeating, which feeds more distrust into control, pressure, overeating, and round you go. So how do we get out of it? Well, here's some truths, and I see it. And this is within a food freedom model. Now, don't get me wrong, if you are somebody who can go, okay, I can't be trusted around that food, so I'm just not going to have it, and that's what you do, and that works for you, and that serves you, fine, great, do that. My content tends to be for the people who have tried to do that, not been able to, and now have so much shame about not being able to that they don't know what to do. And so within a food freedom model, we don't want to remove all opportunities to test and build up that self-trust. It would be like if in a relationship, one partner had been unfaithful and the solution was for that partner to just stay caged in their house all day so that there's no opportunity for them to do what they did again. This is kind of the approach that often gets used with food. Let's put in the rules, the boundaries, and the barriers to try to control myself. When actually food trust develops through experience. And so I'll be working with someone and then they'll have an experience where actually in this moment, I was able to take a different path. And they've had that experience themselves. That's something that they did. So it becomes an embodied lived experience. We start to build up more and more of these embodied lived experiences. So it starts to feel more natural. When you're stuck in a cycle of distrust, it feels kind of natural to you. It feels like who you are. So food freedom is about shifting the focus from control to the relationship. So So there's two aspects to this, because there's the relationship with yourself through the lack of trust, and then there's also the relationship that you will have to different foods. Now, this might sound all well and good, but how do we actually do it? In order to be able to change a situation, we have to be able to look at it differently. For as long as our perspective on the situation remains unchanged, we won't be able to make changes. This is why people learn things, or they do courses, or they go to therapy, is to help change their mindset. So sometimes people will come in and go, tell me exactly what to do. And actually the work is like, let's look at thinking about this differently. So let's start with the first reframe, which is about the trust paradox. So you don't trust yourself, or you don't build self-trust by just being able to control yourself better. It begins with how you respond to yourself, how you show up for yourself. Because one of the opposites of self-trust would be self-abandonment. And self-abandonment is when you turn on yourself. And you know, those times when you've just thought that you are the worst human being on the planet, when you are just filled with shame and disgust at yourself, that is self-abandonment. It would be like a parent just turning on their kid for making a mistake. And then the other side of self-abandonment is just complete avoidance. When we avoid ourselves, when we completely check out, we numb, we scroll, we eat, we do other addictions or compulsive behaviors, anything to get away from our own experience. Self-trust comes from being able to be in our experience and to respond to our experience differently. Because when we are able to respond to our experience differently, more kindly, more understanding, more curiosity, etc., paradoxically, we then start to change our experience because we're not fighting with ourselves anymore. And so that trust actually gets built through the repair rather than perfection. So for example, in a relationship between two people, person A does something that upsets person B. Now person B goes to person A and tells them. And person A accepts that what they've done has upset somebody. They have a conversation about it, they work through it. That relationship between those people will be stronger than if person A had never said the thing to begin with. Because what it shows is it shows that this relationship can take tension and it can repair. There's a whole therapeutic concept around this called rupture and repair. That when there's some kind of rupture and we repair, we end up stronger. We learn and we grow from that. So that works in relationship with other people. It also works in relationship with ourselves. So my relationship with food, being so terrible as it was for those years, was a massive rupture in my relationship with myself. It did a real number on how I saw myself. But having recovered and come out the other side of it, that repair work has actually made my relationship with myself, my sense of self, stronger than before my food problems even started. Seems like a high price to pay for a better relationship with ourselves, but it's an opportunity to have that if we want it. But when we reject ourselves, that's the self-abandonment part. This is the part we need to stop doing in order to build the self-trust. Not more control, less self-abandonment. So actually the moments after overeating, when you are feeling your worst, when you're feeling like you've messed up, these are the opportunities to do repair. Now it doesn't look like, oh, it doesn't matter, everything's fine because I'm just perfect the way I am. You can self-critique, you can say that's not okay, you can say I feel disappointed and all those things. Just like a parent that never corrects a child or tells that child off for anything, that's probably not a healthy parental-child relationship either. So it's being able to hold yourself accountable without turning on yourself. And that can be done through kindness. The next reframe is about control and safety. So quite often when you're saying that you feel out of control with food and you don't trust yourself, what may be truer is actually you just don't feel safe around food. Because when we don't feel safe, we need more control. And when we're not able to control, that's where the trust breaks down. And control is used as an attempt to create safety. So rather than I'm untrustworthy, it's I'm actually feeling unsafe. And that's why my behavior isn't very regulated around food. So we're prioritizing safety and regulation over control. And safety actually comes from things like permission. Permission to know that you are going to have enough to eat, that you're not going to deprive yourself. Permission to make choices, because if you're also always shoulding yourself, I should be eating this, I shouldn't be eating that, or even outside of food, it's probably a pattern as well. I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. You are constantly depriving yourself of freedom, even if your behavior looks free. So it could look like actually to overeat and eat whatever I want in this moment looks like an expression of freedom. But when your voice in your head is constantly going how you shouldn't be doing this, you're getting it wrong, that's not true freedom. Permission can be gradual. It doesn't have to be, I just have to give myself permission to eat whatever I want, whenever I want. But it is a graduated move towards more permission because you don't have enough of it. And isn't it true often that if you have a binge or you feel like you've eaten too much, the desire for control shoots up, so then you try to control and eat less? And a lot of people that struggle with some kind of overeating actually swing between not eating enough and then eating too much. And that lack of predictability around food, if you are constantly restricting, binging, that also threatens our safety at the nervous system level. And part of predictability is the regular eating. Our brains and our bodies want to be able to anticipate. We have cycles and rhythms. And so if you can get a rhythm around food that works for you, that will also really support you to feel more regulated. And of course, we know that food can change our emotional state. So if food is an emotional regulator for you, maybe this is the area to be looking at first, how to improve your emotional regulation skills rather than constantly fighting with food, which is actually creating more emotional dysregulation. And thirdly, let's consider identity here. Often our behaviors and our experiences start to feel like who we are. Like, this is not your personality. This doesn't say anything about who you are as a person. This is a pattern of yours, and patterns can be changed. One of the things that keeps us stuck in our patterns is we keep affirming that this is who we are. Like, I'm the person who can't control themselves around food. I have no self-trust. Now, I'm not saying that we can just use affirmations to get out of this problem, but affirmations can absolutely keep you stuck in it when you're constantly declaring yourself that this is your reality. I'm not asking you to just start saying the opposite and try and convince yourself it's true, but it's about stopping continually affirming to yourself that this is your truth. And these beliefs and sense of this being just who we are gets built up by repeated experiences, not through some kind of absolute truth. But then we treat it like an absolute truth based on the past. So if you've always, or for a long time felt out of control around food, your brain is constantly predicting that you're going to be out of control around food. And this is how the past keeps us stuck. And of course, I wasn't going to let you go without talking about compassion. Often, like, using food or overeating or compulsive eating is often an attempt to solve another problem. So are you trying to manage difficult things without self-compassion or support? Without self-compassion, most of us tumble into self-judgment. And then we just don't even want to be ourselves anymore. We'll convince ourselves that other people just have everything together and that we're the only ones that are really this messed up. Self-compassion actually has a regulating effect on the limbic brain, which is where all our emotions are kicking off. It decreases the sense of shame. And for many people, when the shame and the emotional, just general bodily regulation is improved, the intense cravings tend to reduce, assuming you're not restricting, of course. So as a quick review, kind of how do we build self-trust? Firstly, when there's a lot of fear and emotions around your eating, every food decision, the stakes feel really high. You know, is this food decision going to trigger a binge? Should I be eating this? Is this going to make me gain weight? All of that mental noise creates like an internal dysregulation around food, and it affects your capacity to make balanced choices. Now, I appreciate it's not so easy to just go, I'll just lower the stakes when this is something that's been so big in your life, perhaps for a long time. But I might put it like this. What's your top goal? If your top goal is to lose weight, then, and that's your obsession, every food decision becomes very, very important, because you know that it's an accumulation of lots of decisions that's going to affect that outcome. Now, I'm not saying you can just get rid of the desire to lose weight, or you shouldn't focus on weight loss or anything like that, but that when it is the top goal, for many people, it's dysregulating them. If your top goal, if you can find it in you that it makes sense that your top goal is to heal this and to start building up more self-trust. And that self-trust isn't about control, but it's about regulation. It starts to change the motivation behind your decisions. This is why focusing on weight loss is so problematic for people who have a binge problem, because it tends to negatively impact their choices. And then they blame themselves and they just get deeper and deeper into that shame hole. We are looking at consistency here, not perfection. We're not interested in perfection. Perfection doesn't build self-trust. Even if you manage to, I don't know, go carnivore for a couple of years or something like that, if you're watching my videos, chances are that didn't work out for you long term. And that didn't actually fix the self-trust problem. If anything, it's made it even worse. Because you're like, well, see, if I'm not doing it like this, then I can't be trusted. So this is about anticipating mistakes, knowing there are going to be times when you veer off the path, and it's about consistently returning. Consistency isn't about just managing every single day to do it like this. That is a type of consistency, but it's also a perfectionistic view of consistency. So maybe even inconsistently consistent, but we keep returning. When you avoid, restrict, or deprive yourself of certain foods, that can feed the distrust. And so again, within a food freedom model, we look at increasing permission. For some people, that looks like an all-in approach. And some people would just go all in and go, I'm going to eat whatever I want, and it works brilliantly for them. But that's not everyone. For many of us, we need a little bit more of a graduated approach. Because yes, this is about a relationship with ourselves, but it's also about a relationship that we have with different types of foods. There'll be some that'll be way over here, like you feel too dysregulated around those foods to be able to really give yourself permission around those yet. But there might be some that are a bit more in a grey area. And this is where having your own back is so crucial, because it's how you talk to yourself about your decisions, what your motivation is behind your decisions, that will help you to be able to make freer decisions that you feel happier about. And because you have promised yourself so many times that you're going to do it differently, but the problem is you make this big sweeping promise that from this moment onwards, this is the kind of person I'm going to be around food. This is how I'm going to eat. This is how it's going to be. But that all or nothing thinking means you make big promises and then you're unable to keep them. So start with the small promises. And it doesn't have to be promises, and I think it's better if it's not promises about what you're not going to do, and make it more promises about what you are going to do. And it's hard for me to give examples of what this might be because everybody's in a different place. But it could be that you make a promise to yourself, or you make an agreement with yourself that you're going to have breakfast every day this week, or even just tomorrow, if committing to something for a week feels too big. Making the here and now promises, not promises that from this moment onwards, I'm going to do this thing forever. That's often what leads to feeling trapped. And many of you will probably relate to the idea of having a rebel inside you, or feeling like you have a part of you that self-sabotages. And normally that part is just fighting for our freedom because it believes that our freedom is being restricted. This is why sometimes making promises to yourself about things you're going to do that, as far as you're concerned, are only going to benefit you, can actually start to feel like a threat to our freedom, because it feels like now we have to do this thing. It becomes another should. And when you've lived with a lot of shoulds and breaking a lot of shoulds, you might have quite a complicated relationship with the idea of should. If you want to understand more about how the food freedom model works compared to something like the abstinence model, which says, let's avoid these foods, I'm running another round of my rebel-friendly intuitive eating course that starts on the 1st of April. I'll pop a link below if you're interested. If you're watching this in the future, I normally run it at least once a year, so you can click on the link for future dates. But the idea is that even something like intuitive eating can turn into another should. It feels like another program that we're trying to follow. And when you have a history of trying to do programs and feeling like you failed at them, there's like part of you that's anticipating that you're going to mess up at some point. So the way that I approach intuitive eating, just generally and in my course, is to look at it with nuance, is to look at it with a critical eye as well. It's not perfect, but the course is also about helping you to understand how you can take something like intuitive eating and pick out the bits that work for you. Because it can feel like you're doing it wrong if you're like, I'm not sure about that principle over there. Or I'm not sure how this would apply to me if I have a health condition or if I have ADHD or something like that. And I really think that when it comes to figuring out how to eat, that it kind of needs to come from us. Yes, getting information from outside is helpful, but that decision, that feeling of like, this is the right way to do it, needs to come from a part of you, like the wiser part of you, versus listening to somebody like me or anybody else on YouTube or in books or podcasts. There is a way that some people approach recovery where it's like, I'm just going to follow what you say to the letter because I believe you know what you're talking about and I don't know anything. That dynamic is problematic because it doesn't feel like you've really owned your choices and really from like your embodied sense of self gone, yes, this is what I need. You need that feeling inside you. But above and beyond all the food stuff is that self-trust comes from getting to a place where you know you are not going to turn on yourself. It's the worst thing you can do. It's not conducive to change and it makes you feel horrible. So notice where you're doing it. Recognize that you are a human being who of course has flaws and that has this particular challenge around food. And it doesn't say anything about your character, your worth, or who you are. Anyway, I hope this was helpful and I will see you on the next video.